The Department of Public Health and Human Services is pleased to bring you Aging Horizons, Medicare, Social Security, fraud and legal issues, veterans benefits, and caregiving. Aging Horizons is a program dedicated to inform and prepare Montanans on these timely issues, making a difference to you and your loved ones. Here now is today's program host.
Hi folks, today on Aging Horizons we're going to be talking about the history of foodways in Montana. And we have a real expert with us today, Zoe Ann Stoltz from the Montana Historical Society Research Center. We have a great and really fun, interesting show planned for you today with lots of fun information you probably didn't know about. We want you to stay tuned. We have a great show, so stay with us.
Energy Share helped me in 2008 and I was able to repay them. This year, with family and health issues, they came through for me again.
I'm a veteran. Energy Share helped me when I needed it, and I wanted others to know that it's available.
I was going through a really hard time in my life, and Energy Share gave me the assistance I needed so the stress in my life would be less. Thank you, Energy Share.
If you need help with your heating bills, call Energy Share at 888-779-7589 or visit us at EnergyShareMT.com.
In Montana, we know all about responsibility and personal accountability. Don't pay another medical bill that you don't understand. Take charge. Review your medical bills and call your provider right away if you have questions. If your bills are too confusing, call Montana SMP, the Senior Medicare Patrol. Call 800-551-3191 and get connected directly to a local office. Call Montana SMP today.
All across Montana, people are making a difference.
Well, my Arthritis Foundation exercise program is a lifesaver to all the participants that are in it.
I bent down to pick up a piece of trash, and when I stood up, I started walking backwards down the steps. I managed to stay up because of a lot of the exercise we do helps with the balance. My lifesaver.
For more information, visit dphhs.mt.gov/arthritis.
I didn't know. Montana has one of the highest suicide rates in the country.
Know the signs.
Depression. Isolation. Giving away possessions.
Alcohol abuse.
It's what you can do now that matters.
Don't be afraid to ask. Are you suicidal? Tell someone.
Don't leave the person alone.
Offer hope. Call the Lifeline.
Don't keep suicide a secret.
Break the silence.
Hi folks, and welcome to Aging Horizons. I'm Kimmy Everman, your host, and this show is brought to you by the Department of Public Health and Human Services. Today we have a great show planned for you all about the history of foodways in Montana. And we have a real expert with us today, and that would be Zoe Ann Stoltz. Zoe Ann, welcome.
Thank you.
You've been with us before, so welcome back.
Always nice to be back.
Well, good to have you. And Zoe Ann, just to remind our viewers, you are a reference historian with the Montana Historical Society Research Center.
Exactly.
So that's different than, you said, the museum.
Much different than the museum.
Tell us a little bit about how it's all set up before we go on.
Oh, I'd love to. So the Montana Historical Society has 5 programs, or 5 departments, if you will. The museum takes care of the 3-dimensional objects. Then we have outreach and interpretation, which also involves education, publications, which puts out our wonderful magazine, Montana, the Magazine of Western History, State Historic Preservation Office, which houses the state archaeologists and helps folks with the National Registry, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the Research Center. And the Research Center is comprised of the Montana State Archives, the library, which is the published material, and then the photo archives. And we are open Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 5 for the public, no appointments needed. We pride ourselves on being able to, most days, to balance that idea of getting information out there and sharing it, as well as taking care of the documents which are entrusted to us, because the documents that we have belong
they're fragile.
They are fragile, and we have microfilm of Montana newspapers that date back to 1864. We have journals, letters, old territorial documents. It's it's almost endless what we have to offer.
So what kind of people come in on a daily basis? I mean, is it I assume authors and folks looking at genealogies and that sort of thing?
We run the gamut. We've had with schools starting recently, we've had classrooms come in, every class, let's see, 6th graders on projects, as well as students from Carroll or from both universities, from Bozeman and Missoula. We also, as you say, we do have authors come in. We have scholars from literally all over the world come in to do research at the Historical Society. It's a pretty great place.
That sounds pretty exciting.
It is.
Now, we were talking a little before we started here about foodways, and what that really means is a lot bigger than just a title, isn't it? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Zoe?
It is. Well, thank heaven for this booming interest in food. We've got the Food Network, and people are starting to realize how important it is to prepare your own food and not worry about the TV dinners that you're going to have tonight. And because of that wonderful interest, social historians have been able, especially those of us who like to eat and read about food, have been given the opportunity then to look at foodways, which is a new term, or a term that we're using for how food connects with culture, our economy, with society. We all eat.
Right.
We all have memories of food, and so it's encompassing. It goes from our individual histories through to our national history. It's really, I think it's a fascinating topic.
Well, and ever changing when you look at all the fast foods and the things that are genetically altered and all the things that you have to take into consideration as you're gathering, if you will, and eating your food.
You bet, you bet. It changes so quickly, our eating habits. We may not think so. One of the things I like to ask when I am addressing a group is, when was the last time you had Jell-O? I'm in my 50s, and I remember a time where you rarely had any sort of banquet or potluck or holiday meal in which Jell-O was not served. And now we have many of the young people that I work with who are in their late 20s and early 30s have never had Jell-O, and it's gross to them, and it was natural to us.
Yeah.
So look at how quickly that food has come and reached its peak and now is being treated differently.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I know in the 50s and 60s, when I was coming up, my mom, everything was canned. And boy, did she love all those canned vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And that's really changed as well.
It really has. It has. There's a bit of a resurgence, I think, on that sort of productivity and production in the household. But women who are now part of the vast, not the majority, but a huge part of the workforce, there's only so much you can do during the day.
Right.
And as my mother, as well as yours, that was their primary job, was to preserve the food and make certain there was food on the table. And they took steps to do that, whether it was canning or dehydrating. They were geniuses in the kitchen.
Yes, and I remember my dad saying how far he could remember his mom making a nickel go when it came to food gardens and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now, we just have a minute left in our first segment, Zoe Ann. Tell us just a tiny bit about what brought you to want to be a part of this whole history of foods ways.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, as you know, the last time I spoke, I discussed what I was finding in the cookbook collection at the Montana Historical Society Research Center.
Right.
And this type of research was the next step. The cookbooks seemed to be the foundation, and you could see history and lives change through the cookbooks, and these are some of the topics that came up during those studies.
Well, awesome for us and our audience, because this is sure an interesting topic. And folks, you know, we just have a couple seconds of our first segment left. We're going to talk more about Jell-O, I think, and a lot more things that you will remember coming up with, so stay with us.
Sometimes the difference between having the life-saving medications you need and going without is the premium on your Medicare drug insurance. If you are a Montana resident enrolled in the Medicare prescription drug program, you may be eligible to receive help with your premiums, even if you own your home or other assets or think you may have too much income. Call or visit the Big Sky RX website today to find out if you qualify.
There you go, ma'am. See you next month.
Thank you.
Every generation produces heroes, men and women who step forward to defend our country in time of need, no matter the personal cost to themselves. And though we can never fully repay them, we can make sure they have access to low-cost, long-term care when they need it. That's what Montana's Veterans Homes are all about. If you've got a hero in need in your family, call us. We can help.
Here in Montana, we love our outdoor activities. Unfortunately, few of them are risk-free. Indeed, Montana is second in the nation per capita in head injuries that can destroy the lives of people we love. That's why you should insist your family always wear protective helmets. But you can do even more. When you fill out your vehicle registration this year, circle the Y and donate $1 to support traumatic brain injury prevention and education. Now that's using the old noggin.
Seems like the power bills just get higher and higher every year. I'm on a fixed income and it just doesn't keep up. I hate to do it, but sometimes I have to choose between my meds and staying warm.
No one should ever have to choose between staying well and staying warm. If you need help paying your heating bills, call us today to find out if you qualify. Help is available for both homeowners and renters.
The cold gets into your bones and you can't get it out.
Hi folks, welcome back to Aging Horizons. We're with Zoe Ann Stoltz today, and Zoe Ann is with the Montana Historical Society Research Center. Zoe Ann, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, we've been talking a little off camera about a couple of really interesting stories that have a lot to do with food, and that is the ice that came to be one of the ways that they kept food fresh.
Exactly.
Tell us a couple of those stories that you were telling me.
Okay. Well, one of the things that piqued my interest is a great story that my dad tells. And he was born and raised in Miles City, and he has a story about this hot summer days waiting on the front steps of their house and waiting for the Iceman to come down the street. And when they did, when the Iceman did come down, Grandma would have a sign in the window that would say 25 cents or 50 cents, depending on how big a chunk of ice she wanted for the ice box. Remember, this is before electric refrigeration.
Right.
And he and his brother Walter would run out of the street and help the Iceman bring the cube of ice in, a big chunk. And as a reward, the Iceman would give them ice chips. And then the ice was stored in sawdust. And they would have to clean the ice chips off and then chew on this wonderful August. Imagine being in Custer County in August and being handed some ice. It was a wonderful treat for these boys. And just not long after Dad and I had finished talking about that, I was talking with a dear neighbor, Gene, and he was raised in Anaconda, and lo and behold, he had the same story, waiting for the Iceman and then being rewarded with the ice chips.
Sure.
And that just led me into a wonderful period of discovery as far as the ice industry goes in Montana.
Well, tell us some of your discoveries. I'm waiting to hear.
Okay, well, not that long ago, most urban families had ice boxes, not refrigerators. So when I say ice box, I mean literally the old-fashioned ice box. They were traditionally wood with a zinc lining, and a big block of ice would be put in the top, and then that would keep the food cool. Not everybody had ice boxes, but I'm going to say some ranchers and farmers had ice houses.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what they had to do during the winter, was harvest ice. And this is, I don't know if your viewers can see it, but an ice saw. And it's just indicative of the fact that this is an industry that we no longer have in the world. But men and women would spend their winters harvesting ice from local ponds, creeks, rivers. They would store them in ice houses. Probably every little community and large community had ice houses. They would store the ice, and then it would be used slowly through the summer for their ice boxes, for the occasional ice cream making. And then the cycle would go on. It was a major industry in Montana through the 40s. By the end of the 40s, you can see that the industry has dropped off. And that's electric refrigeration was introduced the mid-20s. And of course, it took a while to catch on, and it was an expensive piece of equipment. But by the mid-40s, the ice harvesting is no longer a real viable industry in Montana. It's fascinating, and the amount of labor is almost incomprehensible to me.
You can't even, you look at this and you can't even imagine the strength it would take to do the job that you would need to do.
You bet. Well, we have several reminiscences at the Historical Society about ice harvesting, and it's as manual labor intensive as you can imagine. But they would have to clean the ice off. Let's say a local pond, clean the ice off. They would mark it with grids, and then they would often get in there with just drills to get a space where then the ice saw could get in. And of course, the men who use these are called sawyers, just as the men who cut trees down are called sawyers. And then they would just start sawing blocks of ice. They would be loaded on sleds, or they'd be floated to the shore until those ice houses were filled.
Wow.
It's amazing. And interestingly enough, when refrigeration came to the fore, that was artificial ice, is what it was called. Real ice came from the local pond or lake or river. If it was made with refrigeration, it was artificial ice.
Wow.
I get a kick out of that.
Wow. And I would imagine that this is a pretty young man's sport, I would say. I don't think you could do this with a lot of years on you, because that would be a hard job.
Well, it would be hard, but we're talking about generations of men and women who woke up to do hours and hours of physical labor.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And you know, we just have about a minute left in our second segment, Zoe Ann. Why is refrigeration so darn important?
I'm so glad you asked. There's a great quote in a collection at the Historical Society, interestingly enough, from about 1910 into the 1930s. A huge ice company was owned and operated by a woman in Helena.
Oh, wow.
And she is quoted as saying that if you are cold and you need a fire, you can burn the piano. But if you have a baby and you need to keep milk sweet, you need ice.
Okay. So it comes back to our children.
Well, it does, but to keep things preserved.
Sure.
The
Absolutely.
milk, the cream, the uncured meats.
Right.
We needed a way to keep that stuff preserved.
Right. Well, folks, we have a whole lot more for you. This has been a really fun and interesting topic. I hope you're enjoying it as much as me, so stay with us.
It was a beautiful day. There was about 2 square feet of ice near the door, which I slid on and fell, cracking one rib. And I became somewhat frightening for me to walk outside, particularly in the winter. The Stepping On program came as kind of a surprise to me. I didn't know about it. I've learned the importance of proper balance. I think anybody who has fallen or is afraid of falling would benefit from this program.
I had a pain in my neck and jaw. I was just short of breath. I was just so nauseous. I had a tremendous pressure in my chest. My heart felt like it was going to burst. I didn't know it, but I was having a heart attack. A heart attack. I could have died.
Know these warning signs and call 911 immediately. Symptoms of heart attack in women are often not recognized. New medications and treatments can prevent disability and save your life.
Questions about Medicare and other types of insurance? Contact the State Health Insurance Assistance Program office to get answers to questions like, what is the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? And how do you decide if you need Medicare supplemental insurance? This insurance counseling program is not a sales program. It is available to provide answers to your insurance questions. For more information, call the State Health Insurance Assistance Program office at 1-800-332-2272.
If the Aging Network in Montana was a restaurant, the sign out front would say, over 50 million meals served over the last 30 years. Since adequate nutrition is critical to health and quality of life, nutrition services are an important factor in keeping older Montanans healthy, independent, and living in their community and home. To find out more about senior nutrition programs in your area, call 1-800-551-3191.
Hi folks, welcome back to Aging Horizons. It's our last segment. We've been talking about the history of foodways here today with Zoe Ann Stoltz. Now, Zoe Ann, when we left our last segment, we were talking about why it was that refrigeration and preservation in general was so important for our food sources. But you were telling me that something else that was quite prevalent in that time and place were chuck wagons that didn't always use those same preservation kinds of methods to have their food.
Of course, they didn't have ice boxes when they were moving those cattle, whether they were at a roundup or bringing cattle up from the south. But to me, that is just a wonderful example of the different variety of preserved foods and how they were used.
Well, and first of all, before we move on, let's talk about what is a chuck wagon. What was that all about? Because we might have somebody that doesn't know what that is.
Okay. Well, most people in Montana are going to know that we're very proud of our cattle industry and the history of the cattle industry. And it's just fascinating. The first cattle drive from Texas was in the 1860s when Nelson Story drove cattle up and drove them through Virginia City. But imagine having a crew of men that you have to feed. And the early days, the guys often carried their own food, and it was basic: bacon, beans, a little bit of sorghum. Coffee seems to be everywhere. But later on, there was a wonderful invention that came out of the South that is called a chuck wagon. And it was essentially a box that was put in the back of a wagon with all sorts of different compartments for storage for the things that were vital to the cook. And one of our best sources at the Historical Society, anyway, of understanding this process are some photos by L.A. Huffman, and I hope to get those so that your viewers can see them. But so imagine being on the trail for weeks on end and having a crew of anywhere from 10 to 20 guys, and you being responsible for feeding these gentlemen and to keeping them happy. And the chuck wagon cook, to me, has just got to be a genius, because these men, and later women, but early days they were men, took the foods that were preserved, so we're talking bacon, dried fruit, some canned stuff a little bit later, and managed to feed a crew with them.
Wow.
One of my favorite discoveries, I guess, is that these men were often known for the pies that they made.
Oh, wow.
Not just Dutch oven cooking, which is one of the stereotypes that we enjoy today and talk about. But imagine making pies from the back of a wagon. And there was lots of fresh meat. Often they ate wild game. They would, of course, they were moving cattle. Depending on the outfit, they would kill a beef along the way. But the most prevalent foods were the bacon, beans, lots and lots of baked goods, lots of pies and puddings made from dried fruit. Peaches, raisins, apples, you name it, and it shows up in some of the inventories.
Wow.
One of the most interesting things is, I mentioned coffee, in one journal that we have at the Historical Society, they had a crew of 10 men, and they went through 2 pounds of coffee a day.
Wow.
During the trail drive, they wore out 3 coffee mills.
Wow. Yeah, because it's not coffee. That all has to be ground and boiled.
That's right. They were roasting their own beans
Right.
and grinding the beans. But they didn't have to worry about preserving that coffee. They just had to keep it dry.
Right, right.
So just the epitome of how preserved food was used to maintain health.
Sure. Well, and plus you couldn't have sick people. On a job like that, every person counts. And you couldn't have sick people who were having botulism and things like that.
Definitely not. But by that time, our ancestors had it down to an art. We talked about our mothers canning, and great care. They took great care in pressurizing and sanitizing things. And these trail cooks knew how to take care of the food so that the men would come away from a meal happy and healthy.
Sure, yeah. And I guess the canning, that would have come prior to refrigeration. So there were attempts all the way along, and smoking meat, I'm sure, came from way, way back.
Exactly.
So that's all attempts to make sure that the food is safe up to where we are today.
Exactly, where we can go to the grocery store once a week if we have a lot of self-control, and bring it home, put it into our own refrigerator, and keep it. And we don't have to can our own garden harvest.
Yeah.
It's already been done for us at the grocery store.
You know, I can remember as a kid my mom making bread every Friday or something like that. I haven't ever made a loaf of bread, I don't think.
But remember
I always buy it from the grocery store.
Yeah, remember that smell though. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, that's sure true. Now, you know, we just have about a minute left of our last segment, and you know, you and I were talking, speaking of groceries, you were talking about an old-fashioned grocery chain here in Helena, Sawyer's, that you've been wondering about.
Yes, I have consistently run across references to a grocery store chain called Sawyer's, and they appeared about the time that what we know as Buttrey's and Safeway. And they've been very hard. I've been very challenged in finding information on Sawyer's. They had grocery stores all over the eastern part of the state, and it seems to be very common that men who wound up working for Safeway and Buttrey's later on in their lives often had their beginnings in Sawyer's.
Oh, heavens.
But I'm looking for information on that grocery store chain, so I'm hoping that people will give me a call at the Historical Society.
Great. That sounds good. Well, Zoe Ann, thank you so much for being with us today. We had a great show, and it was a lot of fun. Thanks, folks, and always stay with us for a great show.
Special thanks to the Department of Public Health and Human Services for their continued support. Hosts on Aging Horizons are program specialists at the Montana Office on Aging. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions. For more information about Aging Horizons, call the Department of Public Health and Human Services toll-free 800-332-2272.